Hello, everyone, and welcome to Magma Ragers episode 65. I've got Pand3m0nia with me as always. We've got a couple news items. Obviously, we're going to be talking about Puzzle Labs that just released. We're going to be talking about some decks, some Odd Warrior, and some Cube Rogue. And then, of course, we've got our usual esports segment. So, Pand3m0nia, how have you been enjoying Hearthstone recently? How have you been finding the Boomsday expansion? Let's just talk about the expansion in general first.
Well, I've been once, like I was saying, the diversity of decks is always nice. But for me personally, as we talk about a bit later, Warrior is not dead. That's probably the most exciting thing for me is that I can play a control Warrior and not feel sad.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely some new cards that are carrying that deck, but as you said, we will discuss that a bit later. First up, of course, we delayed this episode at first because of the Puzzle Labs was releasing on Tuesday, which is our normal recording day, and we wanted to actually get some hands-on testing in the labs before we, talked about it. And then I had internet problems yesterday, so we couldn't record. So, I mean, you've been playing a little bit more of the Puzzle Labs than me, but let's just talk about it. For those that don't know, maybe if you've been taking a break from Hearthstone but still watching these podcasts, for instance, then the Puzzle Labs are some challenges where you have to satisfy conditions. So, of course, there's some lethal puzzles where you just have to kill your opponent. There's some board clear ones where you have to remove it's both sides of the board, right? I haven't done any.
Yeah. You have to. Yeah, board clear. You have to remove the whole board, your board and your opponent's board. Then the mirror is the mirror is where you basically got to position that your minions and your opponent's minions look exactly the same.
Yeah, you've got to mirror the board. Yeah.
You got to mirror the board, and then survive. You've got to get your health up to 30.
Yeah,
is basically what the aim is.
Yeah, and I mean, there's like quite a lot of puzzles. There's also the Boom's final puzzles that come in.
There's 100 and something puzzles, I think they said.
Yeah.
There's a lot of puzzles
of varying degrees of difficulty, right? Like the first couple, the first like maybe 2 sets in each thing are pretty easy. Yeah,
the first set. The second one already starts getting a little bit harder, but
yeah. But I mean, okay. I think there is a lot of like really interesting, challenging stuff, and I mean that's what we want to discuss. We're not gonna. Yeah. This is not like a guide. We don't want to discuss like how you solve specific puzzles. You're always welcome to come onto the stream when we're streaming and ask about that as well. We're happy to share our tips there. Obviously, it's best if you can give tips to somebody without actually telling them the solution. That's always the best, and you kind of need those feedback ways to do it. So I think that's better than just looking up the solutions. But how have you found them? Like, how do you think? Firstly, how have you found these puzzles like yourself? And then, secondly, how do you think? What do you think they add to the game?
So personally, I mean, because I've been playing the game for a really long time, most of the puzzles haven't been that difficult, and as we'll talk about, but a lot of them are very reminiscent or very familiar in terms of either previous combos or interactions, or even current interactions that they're very similar. So a lot of it's like brings back memories. I'm on the final. What's it? The secret lab. Like when you finish the final Booms, like Dr. Boom's puzzles, and those ones are quite difficult. I'm struggling a bit on those last ones, but like the rest of the normal ones are relatively straightforward. I think it's really good. I mean, obviously it's free content, which people love free stuff.
Yep.
But in addition to that, it's really helpful, and I would suggest anyone, if you want to just get better at Hearthstone, I would suggest try to do these puzzles without any help, any guidance, because they teach you a lot of things like interactions, sequencing. A lot of them have situations that come up in regular ranked, regular constructed play.
Yeah.
Like without giving too many spoilers. I mean, there's like the most common ones are there's some defile. There's some defile problems. There's quite a lot of where you have like swapping health and attack. So I think it's really nice. It's different from the previous adventures.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I've seen, I've only done the lethal one and started on the survive one. But a lot of it seems to, it's what it teaches you a lot is the importance of ordering.
Yeah,
That's the big thing that I've noticed. I mean, that's how you solve some of the puzzles. And then there's a little bit that's like uh, in-depth understanding of mechanics.
like
Like for instance, which time a minion dies, like
what
that's
triggers in what order, and
yeah,
like
yeah.
triggers and those sort of things.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it is definitely really interesting and a good way for players to practice their knowledge of those mechanics. And I also think what it's actually pretty good for is introducing new players and even sometimes maybe players that wouldn't have necessarily thought they would be interested in card games. Like if you enjoy puzzles, right?
Yeah.
And like problem solving, well, actually, it's probably good for people to play a bit of that. Once they understand a few of the fundamental mechanics of Hearthstone about like attacking and that, then you can actually look at these cards, look at these puzzles, and really enjoy them as well. I'd actually be interested to see, somebody play it that hasn't really like played much Hearthstone, but maybe enjoys puzzles.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's definitely a different appeal. But I mean, you do like some of the later on ones do need to have like understand the game
Yeah, yeah,
and like. Honestly, I would say like to people, I don't feel too bad if you can't get some of the last ones. Like some of them,
yeah,
I think, do require you to, either be lucky and just guessing, like just click and get lucky, or to really be quite involved in the game because some of them require quite a bit of calculating, quite a lot of sequencing and planning.
yeah, yeah. And when you say lucky, we're talking about like getting lucky in terms of like being able to brute force it almost. Uh,
Yeah, but just
you
just like
know, because there aren't in any of the puzzles. There's no like luck element. They're all you don't need to win any 50-50 rolls or anything like
yeah,
that.
sure. Well, I mean, lucky, yeah. Like I say, is like you try order because the thing is, in most of the puzzles, there's a lot of different combinations and iterations.
Yeah,
In orders you play things, and sometimes you'll look at a puzzle and you go, okay, this needs to happen, but then in terms of optimizing it, because you know if you just do it in the
yeah.
wrong order, you're off a few damage, or you just off a bit.
Yeah, and that's a good general approach, I think, to take as well. To look at it like as an optimization problem, where instead of trying to solve the whole puzzle in your head in one go, if let's say it's about a lethal puzzle, for instance, where you need to deal 30 damage, keep trying out different combinations of cards to try and optimize the amount of damage you can get. Because sometimes, you don't necessarily always have to use all the cards, and I think that that's like a good way to go about solving the puzzle without getting too stuck trying to do all the maths and stuff in your head.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the nice thing is, and I think obviously, when they took into account is that there's a lot of sort of red herrings and a lot of like moments where you start a puzzle and you go, okay, I'm definitely doing this and this, and then as the puzzle, as as
Mm.
you think about more as you work, you go, wait, actually,
Yeah, exactly.
no, I don't have to do that, or no, I don't have to play this first, or there's quite a lot of those where I think there's even been a few where I kind of go into a trap of, okay, so we have to do this first, then we have to do this,
Hmm.
and then and where you kind of your mind kind of gets stuck in that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Anyway, I mean, I think they've been a really great addition. I think it's been just an awesome new way to do this kind of single player content. And big ups to the Hearthstone team. I think they've
I
really
would like
nailed
to
it
see a
with
lot
this.
more of these, and I would like to see more. Like,
Yeah, I
to be
mean,
very honest,
with the way been seeing them do like the single player content, I wouldn't be surprised if we see some kind of iteration of this in the next expansion, and then maybe some different stuff after that. That seems to be the way they're going,
yeah,
but I think a lot of it has to fit with the theme, right? And the
yeah,
puzzles in the puzzle lab, like that fits the theme. So you can kind of make it fit the theme.
yeah,
Like dungeon runs was clearly a kobolds thing, and then they kind of made it fit the Witchwood theme. Um, in a way by turning it
yeah.
into a monster hunt thing, and they could do something similar with the puzzles for the next expansion.
Sure.
But yeah, it would be something cool to see, especially if they had like, oh, apologies, if they had like a way of like updating puzzles, like
Yeah.
new puzzles like every 2 weeks or something. That could be quite cool as well.
Yep. But yeah, just make sure the important thing though is make sure you log in now for your 3 free packs.
Yeah.
And if you beat all the puzzles, so the normal ones and then the Dr. Boom's Secret Lab one, you get a special card back. So I think it was Pand3m0nia said specifically, they didn't want to make it that you have to get all the puzzles, to win the reward, get the reward. So that they're even joking, that's why they give you the 3 packs up front.
Yeah.
Everybody gets them, and you just unlock. It's quite a cool card back to add to your collection.
Yeah, I think that they really didn't want it to feel like a chore. I think that's the key part, and I think they did that well. It's not like so there's some packs hiding for you behind some locked content, and you have to well, not locked content, but like behind a lock.
Yeah, you have to beat
pick.
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
You have
so,
to play.
Yeah, it's just a card back, and like at this point, there's so many card backs in the game. I never change mine. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get back to talking a little bit about the meta. You said you've been playing a lot of Odd Warrior. I mean, why is it that Odd Warrior is actually good right now? I mean, let's start off with that as we take a look at this deck. I think people mostly going to be surprised to see Odd Warriors is a good deck right now. Like, what do you think has from the Boomsday project has actually made the deck relevant again?
Well, okay. So the first thing is the reason Odd Warrior is good is because it kind of preys on a lot of the aggressive decks that are currently doing very well.
Sure.
In terms of the new cards that kind of, I think I would say the card that almost makes this deck reasonable is probably Dr. Boom, Mad Genius.
Yeah.
That's kind of the big card there that makes it.
Yeah.
Then there's quite a lot of other cards. I mean, it's got quite extensive mech shell without being mech warrior.
Yeah.
Cards like Ziliax, good old Giggling Inventor.
Yeah.
And even Dynamatic is quite a big part of it.
Yep.
And then not technically a mech card, but sort of a mech synergy card, Omega Assembly. After you've played Dr. Boom, Omega Assembly is just quite just a hand refill, allows you to generate extra value.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times quite important.
Yeah. I mean, I think Super Colliders are one of the cards that's really stuck out to me as having maybe overperformed our expectations a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
It's definitely done a lot better than I expected. But I agree. I think without Dr. Boom, this deck would still struggle. Dr. Boom really gives you those ways to win the value game in a lot of matchups. And Omega Assembly is also another key part of that. I mean, we've seen a return of Skulking Geist to the meta a little bit, mostly because of Druid, I would say. But actually hitting the Omega Assemblies is pretty relevant in a lot of those matchups.
Pretty big,
yeah. So, okay, this deck in particular, I think you've been playing a slightly different list, but this is the one we have from this week's Vicious Syndicate meta report. This is the one that Ohad, the editor of the report, has been playing for a while. So, the one interesting inclusion also is a Big Game Hunter in the list. That's a bit different to what you've been playing.
Yeah.
I mean,
I've been running a Zola for more value. I mean, Big Game Hunter, I can see, I think so. Basically, that's sort of your flex slot in terms of, trying to. I think it's meant for Big Druid.
I think that's one of the decks out there. There's
or
also a lot of the. There's also a couple of the Death Rattle decks that like the Death Rattle Rogue that we'll talk about has the the 7/7s that you can kill with it. Any of the decks that have that mechanical whelp, basically, that generate the 7/7, or Lich King is probably the most prevalent card you're gonna kill with it.
Yeah. So I mean this is very in a lot of ways similar to like old Control Warriors. It's got a lot of removal, quite a lot of arm. I mean the fact that you have essentially tank up from the start of the game helps a lot, and I mean this is why against Odd Rogue and Odd Paladin, this deck just cruises. I mean, it's really strong because for the you tank up, and then you've got quite a bit of removal in the form of Reckless Flurry. You got your Brawls. Dynamatic is actually really powerful as well.
Yeah, especially against Odd Paladin, where you can clear up maybe before their level up turn.
And you develop a body to contest the board as well.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of tips for this deck, I mean, I think there's a couple interesting questions that or interesting scenarios players might run into. The one is Dr. Boom. Like, how early do you want to play Dr. Boom in different matchups? I mean, what are the matchups where Dr. Boom is key versus just having the upgraded hero power? Because that seems like a little bit of a contrast, right? Why am I overriding my hero power when I have, crafted my whole deck just to upgrade it?
Yeah, so I mean, so gaining 4 armor is good and well, especially against aggressive decks. But like Doctor Boom is like in this deck is basically your win condition. So in terms of being able to generate the value, from the discovering the mechs, dealing damage, putting more mechs on putting the 1/1s on the board. So in terms of how quickly you want it, it's kind of like you said, it's matchup dependent. But I would say in games where it's in grindier games, so against your control warlocks, control warlocks are a poor matchup, but against like cube hunters, against like your what else is a good example? You'd want Doctor Boom quite early,
Yeah.
as early as you can to try and generate that extra value. Whereas against decks like Odd Rogue or Odd Paladin, I'll be sure you get the extra 7 armor, but like a lot of against those decks, if you can just run them out of resources and just tank up every turn, you win.
Yeah, I think the other balances to consider is the fact that even though you don't have that many mechs in your deck, you still have like the Omega Assembly and the Dynomatic and those kind of cards where actually the rush that Dr. Boom gives your mechs can actually be relevant as well to give you a way of taking over the board and actually sticking your own minions to the board and not having to always rely on your removal from hand to clear the board, right? I mean, like a good example is like Reckless Flurry. If you're tanking up all the time and then you have to use Reckless Flurry, like I think that's also sometimes a tricky card to use. In some matchups, you actually really don't want to use it at all. Or you use it until or you use it like when you're late in fatigue already almost and your armor is like about to tick away to not existing, or depending on how much you've armored up. And
Yeah, it's quite tricky because I mean sometimes you 2 Reckless Flurries in your hand and you sit on like 30 armor and you're like, you probably don't want a Reckless Flurry. And that's also, it adds an interesting dynamic also to how to use that in conjunction with like your shield blocks and shield slams. Because once you play Dr. Boom, you only have a chance of getting the blast shield.
Yeah.
So sometimes you've got to remember then your shield slams. So sometimes you might want to actually Reckless Flurry and then shield block afterwards so you have armor, or shield block, Reckless Flurry, and then tank up so you still have armor afterwards.
Yeah.
There's some little sort of ordering, some sequencing tricks there.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so I mean, the deck is a little bit expensive in terms of cards to craft. I mean, Dr. Boom being a hero card, we'd probably say is a pretty safe craft. Baku is something a lot of players are already going to have if they've been playing odd decks. Ziliax is something we're going to mention again in the next deck, and seems like one of the most solid crafts from the Boomsday project. Being a neutral, it's seeing it play in quite a lot of decks, even those that are not strictly mech decks. So, and I mean, Elise is the other one, which I would not.
You might have already.
Yeah, I would not tell somebody to craft Elise though. Sure, if they have it, they can play it. But like, if they don't have Elise, well, what's kind of a card that we can maybe substitute in?
I mean, I'm just thinking, like, are there any current what good 5-drops are there that are like just?
I mean, like there's Wargear, for instance, that can possibly see play because you have some of the mech stuff already. But I mean,
is there any other useful 5-mana 5-drops?
But they don't have to be 5-drops. You can.
You could put a Harrison. I mean, you could put in like other removal. I'm trying to think about what other removal could you put in.
Yeah. Like, I don't think you really have to put in a 5-drop.
Yeah.
Like, the deck's actually not that weak on 5-drops. I mean, you got the Hatchlings, the Dynomatics, the Giggling Inventors. I mean, Elise is there to give the pack more than anything else.
I I mean, you can run things like Gorhao.
Yeah.
You can run Zola. I mean, that's another legendary, obviously, but like Zola enables you to generate a lot more value. But
Yeah.
obviously, if you have both, Elise with Zola is actually quite cool as well.
Yeah, that's a good example actually of like another card that does a similar thing in generating you the value. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of things you can slot in there. Elise is definitely not that important to the deck. And some of the other epics like Shield Slam and Brawl, those have been pretty consistently good in Warrior. Super Collider is probably more specific to this deck, I would say, than many other Warrior
I'm not
decks.
sure at this point. It's I'm not sure if I really would recommend someone crafting.
Yeah, I mean, I think Super Collider kind of gets by on the fact that you have the tank up hero power. Yeah, that can mitigate the damage that you have to take from hitting stuff.
But yeah, I mean, because it is pretty good.
Yeah, it's definitely not the cheapest deck, but I think a lot of those legendaries are fairly versatile ones that are either worth crafting or a lot of players might already have.
Yeah, so just the deck. So one of the sort of interesting things about the deck is really good against Malygos Druid. It's almost basically a hard counter to strictly Malygos Druid because you just tank up. But if you literally just change the three cards and make it the hybrid Togwaggle version, it becomes almost the complete opposite, and the deck you can almost not beat it.
Yeah, it goes from like a 70% matchup to like a 20% matchup for the Warrior.
Yeah, literally literally that's just with the Togwaggle, Azalina, and the Florist sort of combo.
Yeah.
To essentially mow you. And then literally just swatches the matchup like that.
Yeah, and I mean, it's mostly even really about the Togwaggle and the Azalina. The Florist is a nice way to help facilitate that. But sometimes you can just... And Florist is actually getting taken out of a lot of the decks, so that is something you want to be aware of when you're playing against Druids. Like, if they do the Togwaggle stuff, kind of how do they beat me? Maybe you hold some of your like Omega assemblies until a bit later, so you don't have too full a hand, so they can't like naturalize your stuff to get you to a full hand and then play Togwaggle, so you don't get the ransom. Like that's an interesting point to note.
Yeah, but
okay. I mean, let's move on to the next deck. We have this Death Rattle Rogue, or Cube Rogue, as it's being called in the VS meta report. This is Raina's list, which you got like rank 65 legend with. Some of the interesting things that like stuck out to me in this deck that have been, let's say, innovations compared to the normal lists have been the Loot Hoarder. Just as a way of drawing your key cards, because this is a very like high synergy deck, right? So you want to make sure you have a much higher chance of drawing all those like key cards that you need to draw. The Blades, the Cavern Shiny Finders, which this deck's also running 2. I mean, that kind of shows you how important it is really to draw the Blade. And the other thing that's interesting is the Spirit Singer Umbra. You can play that, and Cube later in the game as a way to get a ton of value. And you can also sometimes even just play it on curve if you're like ahead on the board, which sometimes you might be because of the weapon. And then you can get like incredible value from like the cube and the follow-up.
Yeah, it looks like a relatively grindy. I have not played this deck much. It seems to like a more like a grindy mid-rangey sort of deck. Yeah,
I think it has a lot of potential to start hitting really hard very quickly though. Especially with the whelps and like the eggs and the weapon, like it sets you up to hit you really hard really quickly. But in some matchups you can be a little bit more grindy, and then it does still have quite a bit of burst. I mean, we still have Leroy and Cold Blood. There's also like Leroy Cube plus attack with your weapon. I mean, that's 21 burst. So there's a decent amount of burst in the deck as well. It's not purely like a grindy deck. It can play quite aggressively, but it does struggle against like truly aggressive decks because it's a little bit slow to get on the board. It's very much kind of your classical mid-range deck in that sense. A little bit slow to get on the board, but then its damage ramps up very quickly.
Yeah, and also it's got a lot of moderate-sized threats, right? I'm sure like mechanical webs are big, but like I mean, obviously, sort of the hallmark of a mid-range deck is that it's got a lot of mid-sized threats. It's not, there's not one card that you would really say is the win condition. I mean, maybe Leroy.
Yeah, I mean, I think like your whelps are probably the win condition in a way because you need that, like especially in a grindy game, you need that high value death rattle. And I mean, this deck's even seen like cutting the preps and stuff to just play more of these like value death rattles to get more out of it. I mean, Cube is actually one of the highest win rate cards in the deck. So cubing a threat is basically a win condition. And then we also have a Mossy Horror tech, which is something that has proved pretty prevalent in many decks. In this deck, it has the kind of upside of triggering your death rattles by actually killing off your eggs and your whelps sometimes, which can be an upside. Sometimes it's a downside. You actually don't want to kill off your whelps because they can help protect your board against like AoE and stuff. But it is pretty interesting. And then the other thing that's quite interesting is Ziliax. I mean, in terms of the legendaries, we're looking at Ziliax, Leroy, and Umbra. Umbra, I think, is definitely replaceable. You could even just put it in like another Loot Hoarder, another Vile Spine Slayer, even another Mossy Horror if you're seeing a lot of Giggling Inventors. And Leroy, I think, that's by now a very, very safe craft. If you haven't crafted Leroy, you probably should. And Ziliax, I mean, this is a good example of a deck that's not really a mech deck, but you have the Blight Nozzle Crawler and the Mechanical Whelp, and then the dragons that come from the Whelp. And getting the Ziliax, especially on the dragons that come from the Whelp, is pretty valuable. That's like 10 heal that you can get, and that's a really good way to come back against some of the aggressive decks. Like I almost got there against an Odd Rogue by getting that, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, surely the Odd Rogue is probably just feels like a bad matchup. Right?
It is, but you can do a lot to control the board, especially with cards like Blight Nozzle Crawler. Blight Nozzle Crawler actually is one of the cards that's really overperformed in this deck, I think, from our expectations. I think the card's actually really good. Those Poisonous Rush things you get are just really, really valuable for like controlling the board. And it's even sometimes not bad to Carnivorous Cube them. Because then when you activate the death rattle on your cube, you get like the rushes, and it's probably one of the highest tempo cubes that you can do, if you know what I mean. Like the highest tempo plays you can do with the cube.
Yeah. Sorry, I missed that.
So if you cube the Poisonous Rush guys you get from the Blight Nozzle Crawlers, yeah, like I've been wrecked before against the deck by that, because then you can just like activate the death rattle with like the Necrium Blade. With the Necrium Vial, that gives you 4 of the Poisonous Rush things. That's pretty ridiculous.
Then you clear the board, yeah. And then that's if you can trade the Blight Nozzle Crawler as well. That's obviously more dudes.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think the deck is pretty decent. Mostly good at kind of grinding out Druids, I'd say. It can struggle a little bit against Zoo sometimes. But, it has that kind of classic mid-range position of not being that great against the aggro decks, but being able to really grind out a lot of the other decks. And I'd say it's pretty good against a deck like the Odd Control Warrior too. Although we don't really have enough stats, at least not on the VS, the Vicious Syndicate meta report, in order to actually say in detail the matchups for this deck, because it saw a decent amount of play on day one, but hasn't really seen that much since.
Yeah, I think it's also like some of the other rogue archetypes are basically just being dominated.
Yeah. Okay. So like, I mean, when we were kind of discussing decks to talk about, the meta breaker for this week's VS meta report is Quest Rogue. That's one of the decks that's been performing the best, especially at high legend. It's largely thanks to Giggling Inventor as well. I wouldn't necessarily suggest people to recraft the Quest, because I think Giggling Inventor will get nerfed and then the deck will suffer a lot. So you're not going to get your dust refund like you have previously. The only reason I could see them nerfing the Quest again is if they decide like, geez, we actually can't print so many cards because of this. Let's just nerf the Quest. But I think Giggling Inventor is really the bigger problem here. So I think that's probably going to get nerfed.
Yeah, I mean, like talking about Giggling Inventor, I think the sort of the issue I think with Giggling Inventor is that it's a card that's now seen play in every deck, right? Aggressive aggressive control, even combo decks now. Basically, nearly every deck that can run like Giggly Inventor does run it, except even decks because well.
Yeah.
And I think that's exactly what they. I mean, that's one of the reasons why they ended up moving Sylvanas and Azure Drake to the Hall of Fame, right? Was because
Yep.
Azure Drake was also seen too much play.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I could see Giggly Inventor
Yeah.
get.
And I mean, Quest Rogue actually performs pretty well against Death Rattle Rogue or Cube Rogue. It actually has a better win rate against Cube Rogue than Zoo has against Cube Rogue, which is interesting. In fact, it's actually a better win rate than Odd Rogue even against Cube Rogue. Because basically you give the Quest Rogue a little bit too much time. And that's the big issue there. Okay, so moving on to our esports segment. I think we kind of covered these decks with enough tips that we're not going to talk about a specific tip this week, but we will kind of bring back that segment once we're done talking about these decks, because it gives us a little bit more time instead to talk about specific tips for the decks, and I think that's a good balance. But if you've been missing the tips, let us know. Looking at the esports news, HGG has been back. Started again this week, so you can tune in to see a lot more of the action now, obviously including Boomsday Project cards. And then the other big thing that happened was HCT Buenos Aires. I butchered that pronunciation, but the best thing they had going for them there were the in-between videos, the Spanish Doomsday Project ones. Those were, with no context of understanding Spanish, they were ridiculous. And they were like
over the top.
Wow.
They were like more over the top than the English ones, though.
Yeah.
You talk Mark Tadeus and those developers, but
they were extremely intentionally cringy.
Yeah.
Basically. And Lee managed to win there. A American player, I think he is, right?
I think so.
Yeah, and Monsanto came second, which is a good result for Monsanto. Muzzy was one of the other notable players in the top 4. It was really American players, and Monsanto being the one Canadian there that kind of dominated, I would say, in a way. I think that's with an event like HCT Buenos Aires that had like a qualifier before it, and more qualifier slots for people on the Americas server. You're going to tend to get higher representation of like America's players. And in terms of regions, the US is a little bit stronger, I would say, than the US and Canada are probably a little bit stronger than the South American regions. So that's probably how they generally going to have more people qualifying. But it was obviously also with Boomsday Project, and we saw some interesting stuff. I think the one most interesting deck that stuck out to me was Muzzy's Paladin. I think he was playing the Meat Wagon egg stuff. I really want to try that out more. I still think that Paladin's a little bit of a sleeper class right now.
Yes, yeah. It started as a meme, but quite well with it.
Yeah, and I mean, there's been quite a few people doing pretty well with actually Meat Wagon lists. If you check out the Vicious Syndicate meta report, we'll see that. And we have been talking about that a lot because thanks to us actually being able to delay not purposefully delaying the recording, really. It's actually just come out today as well, the same day. So, go read that if you want an in-depth look at the meta report. I am one of the contributors to that, specifically for the Rogue section. So, the disclaimer, if I really need one. I mean, I feel like enough people promote it that it's not like I'm not promoting it because I'm involved in it. I'm promoting it because it's one of the best ways to know about the meta. I mean, I was reading it a long time before contributing to it, and that's kind of one of the reasons I wanted to contribute to it, because of how useful I found it for the community and for myself.
Sure.
So yeah, go check that out. We'll have a link in the description. But thanks a lot, everyone, for tuning in.
Oh yes. Sorry, just one last thing. If you are in the Gauteng area this coming weekend, fireside gathering at the Nexus in Randburg this Saturday, the 25th of August.
Yeah, that'll be the 25th. What time?
Check out my Twitter or on Facebook. But registration is going to be at 10 o'clock in the morning, and we're going to start at 10:30.
Yep. His
So,
Twitter there is at Pand3m0nia. You can see it underneath his name with a 3 and a 0. You can find him there, and you can also find me on Twitter at dib_gaming. I'll probably just retweet it. In fact, I think I already did retweet your post about it. So yeah, go out and test out all your Boomsday lab creations there. We had one last weekend in Cape Town that was fun. Actually played in it for a change instead of just doing the tournament admin stuff. That was pretty fun. Just testing out like a bunch of the different, a bunch of different self creations, all like aggro shaman, mech paladin stuff. I mean, we've been playing on stream, but the aggro shaman was definitely the weakness in the lineup. So yeah, make sure you go check that out. Support local Hearthstone if you're in South Africa. It really makes a big difference. Getting more people to events is also how we're eventually going to hopefully get more people doing well, getting HCT points, and hopefully eventually getting into HGG. That would be nice.
Yeah, one day.
One day. But yeah, thanks a lot, everyone, for tuning in. We will see you next week. Cheerio.
Cheerio.